citizen video, including video from any town halls you've gone to. And there's more at cspan.org/healthcare.
The federal government today announced the largest medical fraud settlement in U.S. history. Pfizer will pay $2.3 billion to settle charges of promoting its drugs for uses not approved by the Food and Drug Administration. Here's more with Justice Department officials and Health Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. It's about 40 minutes.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Tom Pirelli. I'm the Associate Attorney General, and in that role, I oversee a large portion of the federal government's civil litigation across the country, including the Department of Justice's efforts to combat healthcare fraud through the False Claims Act. I'm honored to stand here today with dedicated colleagues from within the Department of Justice as well as beyond it to announce a historic settlement with Pfizer Incorporated, a pharmaceutical manufacturer, and its subsidiary Pharmacia and Upjohn company, arising out of civil and criminal allegations relating to Pfizer's allegedly illegal promotion of various drugs, most notably Bextra. In a combination civil and criminal settlement, Pfizer has agreed to pay $2.3 billion, the largest healthcare fraud settlement in the history of the Department of Justice. Within that $2.3 billion is a criminal fine of $1.195 billion, which makes it the largest criminal fine in history. Now, today's settlement is an example of the Department's ongoing and intensive efforts to protect the public fisc and recover funds for the federal treasury from those who seek to profit from fraud. It shows one of the many ways that the federal government, in partnership with our state and local allies, can help the American public at a time when budgets are tight and healthcare costs are increasing. Now, before I turn this over to my colleagues, I want to highlight three things about what we're announcing today. First, I think as should be obvious, combating healthcare fraud is one of this administration's top law enforcement priorities. By all accounts, every year we lose billions of dollars to Medicare and Medicaid funds from fraud. Those billions represent healthcare dollars that could be spent on medicine, on elder care, on emergency room visits, or simply lowering the cost of care, but instead are spent on medicines and devices that are simply not effective for the patients to whom they are prescribed, or the result of illegal kickbacks given to healthcare providers to get them to prescribe certain drugs, even if they're not approved for use. When a drug is marketed or promoted for non-authorized so-called off-label uses, any use not approved by the FDA, as was the case here, public health may be at risk, and there's a real danger for patients that the medical providers who prescribed the medicine or the device aren't provided with, don't have full information about the drug's risks and benefits. Because healthcare fraud is such a significant problem that affects both safety as well as the federal treasury, the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services recently reinvigorated our longstanding partnership in this area by launching the Healthcare Enforcement Action Team, or HEAT. And as many of you, I think, know, this task force is led by people at the very topmost level of both departments, and we've already worked to increase coordination, intelligence data sharing, as well as to secure indictments against dozens of defendants, which we've been announcing on a rolling basis and we envision continuing to do. Second, today's announcement reflects the Department of Justice working hard to protect the federal treasury and protect American taxpayers. While most medical and pharmaceutical providers want to do the right things, when they cause false claims to be submitted to the government health care programs like Medicare and Medicaid, that's real dollars out of the American taxpayers' pocket because it affects the federal treasury. Enforcement through the False Claims Act is the primary means that we address this on the civil side. And in this fiscal year 2009, before today's settlement, the department had recovered $1.57 billion in settlement and judgments under the False Claims Act. And as a direct result of those federal settlements, recovered an additional $473 billion to state Medicaid programs for a total impact before today of $2 billion. Today's settlement, which matches a $1 billion civil settlement, increases with the $1.195 billion criminal fine, as well as $105 million in asset forfeiture, increases recoveries under the False Claims Act by the Department of Justice this fiscal year to over $3 billion. The third thing I want to highlight before turning it over to others is that this settlement is a testament to this Department of Justice's approach to law enforcement, which is all about a broad, coordinated effort among federal agencies and with our state and local partners. The efforts here, and many of the people who worked so hard in this case I know are in the room today, reflects coordination and cooperation between the Department's Civil Division, the U.S. Attorney's Office of the District of Massachusetts, the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Eastern District of Kentucky, and the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, all of whom have played an incredibly important role in bringing us to where we are today. And it also includes the investigative efforts of investigative agencies across the federal government, including the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Health and Human Services, the FBI, the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, the Office of Criminal Investigations for the FDA, the Veterans Administration, Office of Criminal Investigations, the Office of the Inspector General of the Office of Personnel Management, the Office of the Inspector General for the U.S. Postal Service, the National Association of Medicaid Fraud Control Units, and the state attorneys general's offices. That list demonstrates for you the broad reach of healthcare fraud as it cuts across many federal programs as well as state programs, and the importance of strong enforcement. From the Attorney General on down, we know that we can do amazing things like recovering $2.3 billion for federal and state treasuries when we partner side by side with our sister federal agencies, our state attorney general's offices, and the American public. I and this department are deeply committed to working collaboratively with federal, state, local, and tribal partners on numerous issues, with healthcare fraud being towards the top of the list. The press release will talk in more detail about many of the people who've been involved in this settlement, but in particular I want to note the critical commitment of Secretary Sebelius and her team at HHS and their focus on stopping healthcare fraud in its tracks through prevention, deterrence, and also through strong enforcement. With that, I'd like to introduce the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius.
Well, thank you, Associate Attorney General Pirelli, and you're going to only hear from 5 of us this morning, because if you heard with everyone who helped with this investigation, many of whom are in the room, this may take all day. But we want to represent the good work that was done, as Tom has already said, by agencies across the government. This really was a team effort. The Department of Justice, the FBI, and other groups were involved with this extraordinary work. And at the Department of Health and Human Services, we're charged with keeping Americans healthy and make sure they get the best care possible. And that means part of the responsibility is spending healthcare dollars wisely. It also means stopping the dangerous off-label use of some prescription drugs. The critical part of the mission is fighting fraud, and that's a job our entire department takes seriously, which you saw in this case. The Office of the Inspector General in this department, and Dan Levinson is here on the stage with me this morning, spent 4 years in the conduct of this investigation. They didn't just implicate Pfizer. They actually identified and charged the senior managers who were responsible for the fraud. Some of those agents are here today, and I'd like to acknowledge them along with Dan Levinson, who has been a tremendous and dogged leader of this office. We're the IG leaders who are here. Come on, I know you're back there. I can see you. Congratulations. The investigators from the Food and Drug Administration also helped put this case together. Now, Americans have tremendous confidence in the medicines they take, and that's a tribute to the great work the FDA does each and every day. But thanks to the attorneys from FDA, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and the IG's office, we now have a safer drug supply available to the American public. This event marks the conclusion of just one investigation. But it's another step in the administration's ongoing campaign to prosecute any individual or organization who tries to rip off healthcare consumers and the federal government. You've already heard Associate Attorney General Pirelli in May. Attorney General Holder and I were together to announce the anti-fraud initiative, the beefed-up anti-fraud initiative called HEAT. And that's already paying big dividends. In addition to this case, A heat investigation in Houston led to the arrest of 32 doctors and healthcare executives in 4 cities for cheating Medicare out of $16 million. The ongoing work of the HEAT Task Force can be monitored at the HEAT website, which is www.stopmedicarefraud.gov, and you can follow the work in cities across this country. As you hear from other speakers this morning, you'll see that this settlement is historic, not only because it's the most money taxpayers have ever recovered from a drug company, but also because it includes the most comprehensive corporate integrity agreement that a drug company has ever signed in the United States. The agreement requires that Pfizer's audit committee conducts annual reviews of the company's compliance program, that senior executives annually certify compliance, that Pfizer create a mechanism for doctors to report questionable conduct by Pfizer's sales representative, and that Pfizer must post information on its website about payments and gifts to doctors. This is the first time ever that a drug company has agreed to look at the risks associated with marketing on its own and develop a plan to deal with those risks. And we are going to continue to closely monitor Pfizer's performance. These steps reflect the Obama administration's dual focus on prosecuting and preventing healthcare fraud. We don't want to just catch crooks, we want to stop them before they strike, whether it's by coming up with new ways to track Medicare claims or prosecutions like this one that make companies think twice before bending the rules. To just give you one additional example, on Monday, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced that for the first time, they're creating a national database to track our efforts to crack down on Medicare fraud. The database will help us identify where we're doing well and where we can do better, and where to find the best practices to improve our results. Now, we know the stakes are extremely high. When companies or individuals defraud Medicare or Medicaid, they're not just stealing from taxpayers. They're also jeopardizing the long-term finances of some of our most important government programs. And in some cases, America's health suffers also. Unnecessary or dangerous procedures don't just cost dollars, they can cost lives. So we're working aggressively in this agency to make sure Americans get the care they need and that the dollars are well spent. Like the rest of our partners here today, the Department of Health and Human Services are committed to doing everything we can to keep Americans and their health care safe. And I look forward to continuing to work with this extraordinary team in the months ahead to do just that. Now I'd like to turn things over to Tony West, the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division. Tony.
Thank you, Secretary Sebelius, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. My name is Tony West, and I am the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division here at the Department of Justice. Today's announcement represents the largest criminal and civil settlement of a healthcare fraud case in U.S. history. This landmark $2.3 billion settlement with Pfizer and its subsidiary Pharmacia and Upjohn Company is important not just because it includes a record $1.3 billion in criminal fine and forfeiture to resolve, and not just because Pfizer has agreed to pay $1 billion to resolve serious fraud allegations, including over $300 million paid to the states. This case is important because of what it says about the U.S. government's coordinated efforts to combat healthcare fraud and what those efforts mean to millions of Americans who rely on the integrity of programs like Medicare and Medicaid for the health care they need. Today's settlement demonstrates that healthcare fraud is a priority, a top priority for the Civil Division and this Department of Justice, and that when it comes to marketing drugs that so many of us rely on, we will expect companies to be honest about the claims they make about the drugs they sell. This civil settlement and plea agreement represent yet another example of what penalties will be faced when a pharmaceutical company puts profits ahead of patient health. Illegal conduct and fraud like the allegations in this case puts the public health at risk, corrupts medical decisions by healthcare providers, and costs the government billions of dollars. But it's not just the government who pays more. When healthcare fraud occurs, That drives the cost of health care up for all of us. Consumers pay higher premiums. Companies pay more to cover their employees. And every Medicare and Medicaid dollar lost to fraud means that fewer children will see doctors for preventable childhood diseases. More seniors will be faced with the stark choice between food or medicine at month's end. And fewer people will get the health care they need to dramatically improve the quality of their lives. That's why settlements like today's are so important. Not only do they protect consumers, they also bring money lost to fraud back to public health programs, especially Medicare and Medicaid. Today's settlement was made possible by two things: tough enforcement tools and terrific teamwork. First, the tools. The Department of Justice has strong enforcement tools that help us work every day to ensure that taxpayers are protected from fraud. Now, on the civil side, we use the False Claims Act, which has allowed the Civil Division, working with U.S. attorneys from around the country, to recover over $14 billion from fraud against health care programs since 1986. Here, Pfizer has agreed to pay over $650 million to resolve allegations under the False Claims Act that the company illegally promoted 4 drugs using false and unsubstantiated claims regarding their safety and effectiveness, and caused federal health care programs to pay millions of dollars for prescriptions that were not for medically accepted uses. In addition, the investigation of Pfizer began in 2003 with a whistleblower who filed a key TAM action under the False Claims Act, demonstrating the importance of the key TAM provisions in uncovering fraud in government programs. Now, we also used the anti-kickback statute to put an end to Pfizer's practice of paying kickbacks to health care providers to induce them to prescribe many of Pfizer's own drugs. Patients must have confidence that their doctors are giving them the best medicines for the right reasons. On the criminal side, the Civil Division's Office of Consumer Litigation used the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which requires that companies specify the intended uses of a product in its new drug applications to the FDA. Now, once a drug is approved for an intended use, it may not be marketed or promoted for so-called off-label uses. That is, a use that is not specified in the application and approved by the FDA. Now, in this case, Pfizer asked the FDA if it could promote the sale of Bextra, an anti-inflammatory drug, for certain other uses and in doses higher than the approved maximum. The FDA, citing safety concerns, said no. But Pfizer marketed Bextra for those unapproved uses anyway. When off-label marketing like this occurs, patients' health and lives are put at risk, and those who cause that risk must be held accountable. Second, the teamwork. Without working together across agencies and state lines, this settlement simply would not have been possible. The partnership that has developed among the various agencies, the U.S. attorneys, and numerous state and local law enforcement officials has recently led to several substantial healthcare fraud enforcement actions, prosecutions, and recoveries. So I want to thank our law enforcement partners for their continued commitment to ensuring the integrity of our public health care programs, and I'm proud to stand with them here today. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Acting United States Attorney for the District of Massachusetts, Michael Laux. Michael?
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. I want to thank Associate Attorney General Pirelli for an opportunity to comment on today's settlement. Today's resolution addresses criminal activity within Pfizer's Pharmacia division regarding the sale and marketing of the drug Bextra. Like every drug, before Pfizer could lawfully sell Bextra, FDA approval had to be obtained. There is no such thing as a general approval for a drug. FDA approval is indication specific. You cannot secure FDA approval for a drug for treatment of one problem, such as a cure for the measles, and then market and sell the drug for another problem, such as a cure for the mumps. Any indication not on the label is off-label, and selling an approved drug intending that it be used for an off-label use is a violation of the law. The FDA, as Tony West said, approved Bextra in 2001 in specific dosages for 3 things: for treatment for symptoms of osteoarthritis and adult rheumatoid arthritis, and for the treatment of primary dysmenorrhea. While Pfizer sought approval for other types of pain relief, the FDA did not approve those indications and did not approve all the dosages and pill sizes. Why not? Because, as the FDA told Pfizer, it was concerned about Bextra's safety. The FDA had noted that Bextra caused an excess of serious cardiovascular thromboembolic events during one clinical trial. Despite the FDA's decision, Pfizer's marketing machine positioned Bextra for the relief of all manner of acute pain as a complement to Pfizer's drug Celebrex, which it had positioned for use for chronic pain. Pfizer's marketing machine pushed this combination from 2002 through 2005. The marketing machine also pushed Bextra for other off-label uses. Among other things, Pfizer did the following. Pfizer invited doctors to consultant meetings, many in resort locations. Attendees' expenses were paid. They received a fee just for being there. And they were entertained with golf, massages, and other activities. Their job was to help Pfizer figure out how best to promote Bextra for the off-label indications. Pfizer's sales force claimed that Bextra was superior to Vioxx, when in fact Pfizer had never conducted any head-to-head studies between the two drugs for approved uses, and thus had no clinical evidence that Bextra was superior. Claims of superiority, when not supported by the label, are off-label claims, and thus violate the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Pfizer utilized continuing medical education events to promote off-label prescriptions. Pfizer utilized a publication strategy to initiate, fund, sponsor, and sometimes draft articles touting Bextra for unapproved uses. It is for this conduct that Pfizer will pay the largest criminal punishment ever in a healthcare fraud case, a criminal fine of $1.195 billion, together with a forfeiture of $105 million. Among the factors we considered in calibrating this severe punishment was Pfizer's recidivism. This is the fourth Pfizer settlement with the Justice Department this decade. First, in 2002, Pfizer paid $49 million to resolve allegations that it had failed to report to CMS best prices for its drug Lipitor. Second, in May 2004, Pfizer paid $430 million, including a $240 million criminal fine for the off-label promotion of the drug Neurontin. Third, in April 2007, Pfizer and its Pharmacia and Upjohn division, the same division involved here, pled guilty and entered into a deferred prosecution agreement for payment of kickbacks and for off-label promotion of the drug Genotropin. That time, Pfizer paid $34.7 million. My office handled the last two matters. And during the 2003-2004 negotiations with Pfizer regarding the drug Neurontin, Pfizer management, through its lawyers, asserted that the company understood the rules and had taken steps to assure corporate compliance with the law. Many of us involved with today's resolution were involved in those negotiations, and we remember these promises. Little did we know, when we struck our bargain with Pfizer in 2004, resolving the criminal investigation as to the drug Neurontin, that other parts of Pfizer were violating those very same laws for other drugs and continued thereafter to do so. Unfortunately, Pfizer is not the only drug company that has participated in healthcare fraud. About a dozen years ago, prosecutors principally in Boston, Philadelphia, and at Maine Justice, but also elsewhere across the country, began criminal investigations of major companies in the drug industry. The first major settlement of these investigations was in 2001. There have since then been 42 other major criminal and civil resolutions against the nation's drug companies. Today's settlement of $2.3 billion means that in this decade, the drug industry has paid to the federal government $11.7 billion, $2.98 billion of that for criminal fines. I want to make a final comment on the amazing work by every member of the government's team. These cases require enormous commitment above and beyond the call of duty for those who work on them, the government's agents and the government's lawyers. They are incredibly hard and exhausting. They take many years of effort. At times, you think that you will never see the light at the end of the tunnel. Moreover, the folks on the other side have more of everything. They have more money, more resources, more lawyers, more paralegals. I cannot praise and thank everyone. If you're here in the press corps, look behind you. Much of the team is here, and it'll give you a sense of the scope of the involved government team that worked on this case. Today's result is a testament to the hard work and dedication of the two lead prosecutors in my office, Sarah Bloom, who picked up the case in 2004 after her work on the Neurontin matter had ended, and Susan Poswastilla, who joined the team in 2006, and of their two extraordinarily busy supervisors, Jenny Bowl and Susan Winkler. This kind of case cannot be done without effective collaboration with other components of the Department of Justice, as you've heard this morning, including the Commercial Litigation Branch and the Office of Consumer Litigation, and all of the various law enforcement agencies who worked on this. The extensive federal team was also ably assisted by an energetic team of state prosecutors, spearheaded by a team of assistant attorneys general from the Attorney General offices in Massachusetts, Oregon, and Ohio. And lastly, we worked seamlessly with the United States Attorney's offices in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania and the Eastern District of Kentucky. Their assistance was crucial. We have collaborated closely in the past with those offices, in particular the office in Philadelphia, and we did so here. We share a common goal, a goal that is shared with everyone who worked on this, and that is to assure that the rules are followed and that the public's money is zealously protected from fraud. Those who would cheat on a broad scale across the United States would do well to take notice of our close collaboration. While this case represents an extraordinary accomplishment, our work to protect the nation's citizens in this area continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Perkins. I am the Assistant Director of the Criminal Investigative Division of the FBI. Now, as you've heard from our partners in this investigation, today's settlement is monumental. It is much more than the largest healthcare fraud settlement in history. Hopefully, it sends a clear message that the FBI and our partners will not stand by and let any manufacturer peddle their prescriptions or products for uses beyond their intended federal government-approved purpose. Under the provisions of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, a company must specify the intended uses of its product in its new drug applications to the FDA. And once approved, as we've heard already this morning, the drug may not be marketed or promoted for any so-called off-label uses, any use not specified in the application which was approved by the FDA. Pfizer and its subsidiary Pharmacia intended to circumvent specific FDA directives concerning their drugs by using its sales force to aggressively promote off-label uses. To date, we've interviewed numerous physicians, sales representatives, and managers who have corroborated these assertions. We wouldn't be here where we are today in this investigation and settlement if it weren't for the ethics, professionalism, and courage of a few company employees. These employees were willing to step up and speak out against a corporate giant that was blatantly violating the law and misleading the public through false marketing claims and providing incentives to healthcare providers to induce them to prescribe certain drugs. I also want to thank the hard work and dedication of the FBI investigators and analysts that worked this tirelessly leading up to this landmark and civil and criminal resolution, in addition to our federal and state law enforcement partners who cooperated in this investigation. Although these types of investigations are often long and complicated and require many resources to achieve positive results, the FBI will not be deterred from protecting the American public through continuing to ensure that pharmaceutical companies conduct business in a lawful manner. Thank you very much. Tom.
Thanks very much to everybody. We will take a few questions.
You've made very clear how Pfizer violated the law and violated its agreements with you all. Did you additionally find any evidence that Pfizer's conduct actually harmed any patients?
Whether or not it harmed patients was not a focus of the investigation, so it wasn't something that was simply part of our inquiry.
Why is Pfizer not making the guilty plea in the criminal matter as opposed to its unit? Is there a concern that would that affect Pfizer's ability to sell the Medicaid, for example, if Pfizer itself pled guilty? Or is it a face-saving gesture? Why is Pfizer pleading guilty?
I'll let you, because it may have to do with the particular history of the acquisition of the company.
The pharmacy division is the one that had the NDA for the drug. They had struck a marketing arrangement with Pfizer before Pfizer acquired the pharmacy division. So in many respects, and while Pfizer's marketing machine was the one that took over and pushed this, in many respects, pharmacy division was a logical division for choice. There is, of course, the exclusion issue that comes up, and I'm sure that's what you're addressing. In some respects, we look at it this way. If we exclude an entity, the entity is done. it has to sell what assets it can to other companies. And those assets include the assets like the drugs and the employees who marketed and sold them. And there is no opportunity in that event for a continuing corporate integrity agreement. As you heard Secretary Sebelius say, this is a phenomenal agreement. And we think that the better choice here is to have a plea that allows us to have a strong, effective corporate integrity agreement with the surviving entity.
Can you explain, I'm just curious, you talk about them being, you talk about them being a recidivist company and a senior manager. You identified senior managers. Can you explain why there are no charges against senior managers you've identified?
Well, there have already been 2 convictions arising out of this for 4 managers, so they're already actually, that's actually already occurred. So,
Could you talk a little bit more about how you describe this so-called marketing machine, how they interacted with doctors? It looks like they sort of created phony prescriptions in effect, these standing orders and sham physician requests. It's like they're playing doctor at the same time that they're marketing the drugs.
and I should say, while I have this opportunity to, Secretary Sebelius unfortunately had to run out and catch a plane. We have the Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services, Dan Levinson, who I think will be able to answer a lot of questions, some of the questions that you all may have. I don't know, Mike, if you want to talk again more about the.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they played doctor. I would say that the sales force at Pfizer was effective at getting doctors to adopt things that were beneficial to the drug Bextra. So I wouldn't say that the reps are playing doctor. I would not.
And is there any other executives that you guys are talking to about possible criminal charges, or is this investigation done?
I think this brings to close this investigation. Won't comment about whether the existence or not of any other investigation, but this brings this investigation to close.
Pfizer executives, what about the CEO? Did he know about this stuff that was going on?
Like I said, this brings this investigation to a close.
Was there much discussion about whether Pfizer or its subsidiaries should be suspended or debarred for a certain period of time to send a real message beyond the money fine?
Oh, yeah. Dan, if you want to talk about what the results of the particular plea here.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm Dan Levinson, the Inspector General for the Department. And first, I'd like to thank the Secretary for her tremendous support and her leadership over these last few months as we have successfully concluded what is a more than 4-year investigation done by many of our great government partners, but I want to single out our Boston regional office. Our special agents did just an extraordinary job over the course of more than 4 years in bringing this case to a successful conclusion. The corporate integrity agreement that is part of the settlement that goes forward 5 years is an unprecedented, what we call CIA, in terms of its provisions and its reach and its scope. The Secretary outlined some of the broad features of the CIA. I want to underscore that for the first time, and we have been doing corporate integrity agreements at the Department for a number of years, this is really reaching into new territory. Pfizer will be under an obligation to proactively identify potential risks associated with the promotion of individual products and actually implement plans to mitigate risks. So we have both internal and external compliance requirements, as well as a very robust plan going forward to avoid this kind of conduct from happening again.
Department, though, a tool you have yet to employ, but could that be employed if they violate the CIA you're talking about?
It could be employed. It's important to understand that this settlement is for the benefit, certainly, of American taxpayers to return significant dollars misspent under the programs. It's also for the protection of our beneficiaries who count on drug pipelines from a variety of manufacturers, including this one. So it is important to understand both cost and benefit as we proceed on putting together a CIA, a corporate integrity agreement that is strong, that will avoid the kind of bad behavior that we have seen in the past, and that serves the benefit of both taxpayers and beneficiaries.
Are penalties for noncompliance included in the CIA itself?
Yes. Yes, they are.
What is the range of penalty for noncompliance?
Well, there will be a range anywhere from fines to potential debarment from the program.
Can you comment on the $102 million that's going to be paid to the whistleblowers?
There's $102 million to be paid to whistleblowers. It's divided among, we can certainly get you more information about how it's divided up. And Tony, if you want to talk about the resolution of the key TAM cases, because it's a fairly broad scope.
Sure, yeah. This was, like many of the healthcare fraud cases that we do, this began with a key TAM action and sort of a follow-on of some of those things. Here, there are several relators who will be getting a recovery from the federal share of the settlement, and so and depending upon, there are I think 11 key TAM actions which are implicated by today's settlement in various parts of the country.
All company employees, all six?
There's been complaints that the key TAM relators are not hearing from justice. Months and months pass without hearing whether you're going to intervene in these mountain of cases against the pharmaceutical industry. There wasn't enough, I'm hearing from key TAM lawyers, lawyers put into this area of the law for a long time. Are you now bringing more resources to these key TAM cases? Because there's a lot.
The majority of healthcare fraud cases that we do here at the Department of Justice, I'd say the vast majority here at Maine Justice, begin with key TAM actions or a result of relator actions, and that's a very important provision of the False Claims Act, and it's a very important resource. And because healthcare fraud is a priority, it's something we'll continue to do.
Are these all employees, all the whistleblowers?
I don't know the answer to that, but we can get you that.
Were they, Mr. Laux? Were they all company employees?
Coming up with the same answer.
We'll try and get that answer for you.
The fourth settlement against Pfizer this decade, how are Americans supposed to trust this company moving forward?
Well, I think as the Inspector General discussed, we have really a path-breaking corporate integrity agreement, which I think is going to be a foundation for ensuring that we will have confidence in the future. But it's going to require an enormous amount of monitoring by the government, and I know the Inspector General's offices at HHS will be spending a lot of time working with Pfizer to make sure that they comply. And we'll continue to rely on the tools that we have, the key TAM statute as well as other federal statutes. And this question about focus on enforcement, I will say this, that from Attorney General Holder on down, healthcare fraud is a very significant priority, and we are putting very significant resources to ensure that we can recover funds in the healthcare area as well as the broader fraud areas wherever we can.
Pfizer wasn't the only pharmaceutical. Can you name any others that are being investigated?
We're not going to comment on any ongoing investigations. So.
Talk about whether there are doctors being looked at as part of it, as a sidebar to this investigation who took kickbacks.
Like I said, the focus of the investigation has been on Pfizer, and then particular individuals within Pfizer, as I noted too, have pled guilty. It has not been on doctors. So.
This settlement was largely done during the Bush administration. Explain to me why you guys are having such a high-level announcement, which never happened in the Bush administration. Is this again to signify your commitment to this area?
Well, there's no question that there is a significant department commitment, but I think it's not surprising that the department and HHS would want to use this opportunity to emphasize our commitment, given, again, the largest such settlement in history, $2.3 billion. I think the most significant settlement prior to that was about $1.4 billion. So this is a very significant day in our efforts. But it is part of a longer effort where we have tried to reinvigorate our efforts. There have been work done by, as we've talked about over the last 4 years on this case, but this is part of, again, our broader commitment to it. So.
You've all talked about how difficult this case was to build. Can you give us just a little bit of idea of how you built it? I mean, obviously, Mr. Perkins, you said your agents interviewed some of the physicians that went to these promotion meetings. What other things did you do to build this case? What other kind of work did you do?
You want to take that?
Well, it was basic investigative work, significant record review, significant interviews of individuals, and piecing it together, tracing the flow of funds, looking at the statute, it really didn't differ from any other type of healthcare fraud investigation we do, other than the size and scope that it took place, as well as working very closely with the folks at HHS in investigative teams. We did. We interviewed physicians, we interviewed healthcare providers, we interviewed people who corroborated that the allegations were being made through the KETAM filings, and gathered the evidence needed, gathered the financial records we needed, gathered the corporate documents we needed, and it was a slow trudge through the process, as so many times these can be, but we're willing to continue with that type of resource commitment simply because of the outcomes that we received and that we achieve here, not only in the fines and the convictions, but also in the protection of the American public.
Last question?
Mr. Perkins, some of the behavior that you all described in this case, such as paying doctors to appear at training seminars, happen all the time. I'll bet it's happening this weekend. The Inspector General had sort of laid out, I think 3 years ago or 4 years ago, behaviors that they thought might cross the line. Are you setting a new standard of behaviors that you think are crossing the line, such as paying doctors to show up at a training seminar, which again is routine?
No, I don't think we're setting any type of new standard on that, and defer to the Inspector General or the U.S. Attorney. But I think what we're doing is we look at each and every one of these. We know when they cross the line, when they don't, and those would be specific individual matters we'd have to deal with. But as far as setting some type of a new standard, no, that's not what's happening.
And just to follow up on that, and one reason why this is obviously a very significant recovery, the most significant in history, is you have a combination of several things, many things coming together, including whether it's the payment of doctors to actually work together to prescribe things off-label for a use that was identified at the time the application was made for the drugs as something that the FDA would not approve. And had real safety concerns about. And as I think as many of you know, the drug has been off the market since 2005. So thank you, everybody. Thanks very much. And thanks to the entire team, many of whom are in the room, for just tremendous work. Thank you.
Thank you.